is to the issue that you addressed in terms of the Islamic dress for women and so forth. The point is that, again, because we don't differentiate between the secular and the profane, the religion and state, what happens is that that Muslims living in a community decide to give up some individual rights for the benefit of the community. We can make that decision if the majority decides that that's what they want to do. In other words, there will be a minority. Some of them may be Muslims who decide not to practice the codes of Islam. Some of them may be Christians or secularists, and they say that we don't want to wear the hijab, but they're going to have to give up individual rights for the benefit of the community.
What about all the
We may
Jews
not agree with that here.
Who now live in the area of what you call Palestine? What about all of them? Are they going to also live in an Islamic state, just like some of the more radical Jews insist everybody must live in a Jewish state?
That's why I think that some people have been throwing up, I don't know who they are, but I've heard it, the idea of one state and two peoples. In other words, that if there's a state under the rule of the Palestinian majority choosing to rule themselves, and Jews decide to live in that state, they're welcome to do so. Those who can't accept Palestinians ruling themselves and ruling the Jews who live there will decide to pick up and go back to New York or to Poland or wherever
I think they'll choose to live in an Israeli Jewish state.
But that's what right now the Jews as a group, they have the benefit of living in they have dual citizenship. They, for example, here in the United States,
most of them do not.
But
most
they've been
Israelis
brought
are
in.
Only Israelis.
Hundreds of thousands of Russian Jews
Yes,
have been brought in.
Some are.
Hundreds of thousands
let's even say 20%
in a country. Okay, 20%. That's like saying.
But let's talk about
out
the 80%.
of America, when we're a population of 280 million, whatever it is. When you say 20%,
I'm not going to let you off the hook on this one.
When you say
I'll grant you the 20%. Let's deal with the 80%.
All right. The 80%, I think even the 80%, I think that the Jews who live in Palestine, the Israelis who live in Palestine, feel that they are still foreign to this country. They will
isn't it
say,
up to them to decide what they feel? When you ask them,
those people
they say they want to live in a Jewish Israeli state.
I think those that lived in Palestine before 1948, they've always had the right. Jews have always had the right to live in Palestine, and they used to come in varying amounts of numbers during history, during the course of history. The point is, those who came after, I don't recognize their right to live in the state. Do you mean,
right.
do I
so
want
to
throw them in the sea? No, that's not the point. My point is that when political,
just hold the thought. We have to pick it up in a second. What you're telling me is that you want an Islamic state ruled by Palestinians, in which a Jewish minority can live, those who have a connection before 48, which is the counterface of what the Israelis are saying. They want an Israeli Jewish state where Palestinians can have minority rights, but as long as you define things in theological terms, one group has to lose. The only way you can deal with this, and both groups can live as their majorities want, is the two-state solution, which is what Yasser Arafat claims he's in favor of. Mm-hmm. And the reason Hamas has so little political support outside of its own circles is, in my judgment, for two reasons. Number one, because it rejects the two-state solution, which most of the secular world supports. Mm-hmm. And number two, because it insists on a theocratic basis by which women especially, but other issues as well, are determined by religious personalities rather than by political personalities. So, but I'm glad you're being candid with me. You basically reject the idea of a Jewish state, whatever its boundaries be.
I don't know the official position of Hamas on that. This is my own view. But let me just comment on what you've introduced. What I'm saying is, first of all, and I just want to correct one thing, is that I did say that those who came before 1948 would always have a right.
Small
but even
minority.
those who came after but even those who came after but are willing to live. In other words, if out of the...
They're not willing.
That's the point.
They're no more willing to live in a Palestinian
That's why in reality we're talking...
than you are to live in a Jewish state.
Exactly. That's why I'm talking about in reality, whoever decides to stay, whoever, under the situation that I outlined, that the Palestinians are in control of their own destiny, and they are in control of their own government on their own land. Now, obviously, the land is only so big. If the Palestinian people in the diaspora have a right to come back to their land, obviously it's going to be at the expense of other people living on the land. How is that going to be resolved? First of all, I think that with the current situation as it is progressing now, of course, it's going to be impossible or very difficult to be settled peacefully. There may be conflict, but that conflict may take on a different character than what we would assume. In other words, it's not the idea that Palestinians or the Muslims or whoever is saying this rhetoric that they want to throw the Jews into the sea or the Israelis into the sea. No. What we want is to have the right to go back to our land. Now, if that means that other people are going to be displaced, that's what's going to happen. Why do I not think that that's such a crime? Because I think the first crime was the taking of the land, and taking it back is not a crime, but only returning the rights.
And
now,
what are you going to do with the 4 million Jews? Only a few 100,000 of them can trace their origins to pre-48. So what's going to happen to 3.5 million Israelis? Again,
those 3.5 million Israelis, how many of any of them decide that they can live in that sort of situation?
Very few.
Then that's fine. Then they will.
That's why they have an army, and that's why they fight.
That's why they have an army, and that's why they fight.
Among other reasons.
And among other reasons, the point is that that will change as long as the Palestinian people don't have the right to their land. When the 5 million Palestinians are able to return to their land. If we believe that that's right, not you, but I'm saying if that is taken as a given, that they have a right to their land, if we can fit 10 million people into Palestine and the Jews are willing to accept that, live under that state, then that's fine. But obviously they're not.
Maybe there is no longer a totally right and totally just solution.
That may be for some people who view that in that way. I don't, for the simple reason that my father lived on the land of Palestine just 40 years ago. My father's still alive. My father instills that tradition. It's not something that was lost. And the fact that Indians lost, the American Indian lost their land to the whites, 3 centuries ago, or starting on 3 centuries ago, and continuing. The point is that
let's deal with that.
Okay,
because I was going to say, if we get in the car and go 2 to 3 hours north, we'll be on the Onondaga Indian Reservation. Many of those young Indians may say, this area is ours. We were here. We were wrongly displaced. The treaties were duplicitous. So we believe that the just thing to do would be for North America to be ruled by the Indians who inhabited it. Right. However, we understand, of course, we have no power to do that, so we do the best we can in maintaining as many sovereign symbols as we can. Well, the Palestinians are in the same boat. You're being put on reservations. Mm-hmm. Your leadership has accepted that. Yasser Arafat, PNA, whatever you want to call it. So isn't this a theoretical discussion? As the Palestinians get put on reservations, young people like yourself say it's not just, it's not fair, we deserve everything, the Jews should live with us in our state, but you don't really think that's going to happen.
No, it is going to happen, and I do believe it's going to happen, and I can't say is that going to happen in your lifetime or my lifetime, but it's going to happen.
Because you believe in God, and God is a just person, or just entity.
Obviously that is part of it. We have in my faith, I have no doubt that the people who belong to that land will have a right to that land eventually, because what has been taken by oppression, what has been taken by force, can only be returned by force. And as long as that's instilled in the Palestinian generations, how are you going to solve their problem? This is what I was going to say.
In the natives of Latin America, in the natives of North America.
And if it is, it means that the fight is not over. It may be in a dormant stage, but if you're right, in other words, the moment that the American Indians, whatever tribe they come from, decide that we want this, we're going to start by declaring this reservation an independent state and work our way up, then I would say that the issue has been rekindled. But if those people whose rights were taken, their progeny, their descendants are accepting the status quo, they want to live on reservations or they want to be a part of the American society, and they're giving up their Indianness, let's say, that's fine. I'm not going to second guess them, but as a Palestinian, my father lived on that land. He's instilled that into me as a child, and now as an adult I decide what I want to do, and I've decided to instill that in my children and my grandchildren, and if I live to be long enough to see my great-grandchildren, in them as well. How are you going to solve that problem? How are you going to solve that problem?
By refusing you power, by refusing you authority, by making sure you don't have
After one generation,
weapons.
2 generations, 3 generations, 4 generations, one of 2 things is going to happen. Either the generations, there's going to be a lapse, and the majority of Palestinians will eventually forget, or will not have the courage or the stamina or the will. They will be so defeated that they will give up, and at that point, however long that takes, and in the future, historians will comment and say, at some point in history, the people gave up. The status quo is this. Let's deal with the status quo.
Not only did the people give up, but the accepted political leadership of those people, in this case the PLO, Yasser Arafat, signed what the world considers to be agreements giving up those rights. Your rights have been given up in the last few years.
Right, and I think agreements have to be enforced on both sides. They are agreements that were signed by Arafat, but we all know what the position of Arafat was, a position of weakness. He was negotiating with no power whatsoever. He didn't have a mandate to negotiate on behalf of the Palestinian people, because the recent polls and elections indicate that there are other groups, most prominent among them Hamas, who the people have decided to support over the PLO or the main Fatah organization, which means that they didn't even have a mandate to negotiate for the Palestinian people, for one thing. Second, when they did negotiate, they didn't have what were they negotiating? They didn't have the power to negotiate. In other words, it wasn't really a negotiation in the true sense. What it was dictation.
So the Israelis
trick them, force them, put them in a position where they had to, where Arafat and his people thought they had to accept it.
International agreements signed freely but under pressure are not valid. Now that's going to be a difficult one to teach in the law schools.
But wait a minute, it's not. I'm not the one who's making it invalid. I mean, Netanyahu has already made it invalid in a sense. The letter of the treaty may have said, so and so, that we will discuss autonomy on this level and so forth. It may have used those words, autonomy, and on this level and this and that. But in the forefront, not even in the back of their minds, at least on the Palestinian side and all those connected with the Palestinian side, they were thinking, and they may have even said it sometime during the negotiations, that these are steps to a final resolution, which includes resolution. Okay,
but that's not what they signed.
Okay, that's not what they signed. In other words, then obviously there was no meeting of minds. In contract law, you know that if you sign a contract, there has to be a meeting of the minds. If someone thinks
wait a minute,
that
I
he's
went to
buying,
law school too. Now, in contract law, if there's a serious negotiation and written documents that are then signed, those written documents are assumed to be valid unless you can prove otherwise, that there was duress, there was trickmanship, there was duplicity.
That's true.
These agreements were signed in front of the entire world.
That's true. But these points, duress, material facts being misunderstood in the negotiations, are a part of contract law. In other words, if you and I are dealing about a cow, and this cow is worth $200, and I offer you $200 for the cow, and you accept to purchase the cow for $200, that's fine. What if that cow is bearing a calf and it's now worth $1,000? That material fact, it makes a difference. If I knew that and you didn't,
we disclosed it.
Everything hasn't been disclosed.
You were shown the maps. You as Palestinians were shown them.
Again,
you and I aren't really arguing. What really happened is the Palestinian leadership so bad in their negotiations, so powerless in their position, so anxious to get money and authority from the Americans and the Israelis, knowingly signed a terribly flawed document. That's what really happened.
But so terribly flawed that even international law may recognize that it has no effect. In other words, that if anyone unilaterally pulled out of it, there would be arguments under international law. But I'm just saying, the one who started, and this is all irrelevant because the one who started with it is Netanyahu.
I hear what you're saying, but
he said what we signed on paper is fine.
I hear
but our security takes precedent over that, which means if there's a conflict between our security, our view of what our security should be, and these papers that we signed, then our security is going to trump those papers. And if they carry on and actually go forth and put it into practice, that means break the treaty, then obviously you have a piece of paper that is worthless and was worthless to begin with.
But you also have impotent Palestinians that have no political or military clout to do anything about their situation in the present. You see the impotence, which is there, which is a reality, which is there. But I see the climax of that impotence, or I see the end of that impotence and we're going on to a new level, which is a level of strength. All right. As far as the new level, how come a few hours ago your political leader, Dr. Abu Marzook, in prison, not far from here, when he answered these questions, he gave the impression that the Palestinians would accept the two-state position so long as the Palestinian people freely voted after they got their state in the West Bank and Gaza, so long as they freely voted to accept the two-state solution. He made that pretty clear.
I think that he was right in what he's saying. I'm talking more in terms of what I think is going to happen in the future, what I think is realistic, and so forth. And I'm giving you my candid view. What he's saying, I think, really it goes to show how the Islamists have been misconceived in a sense. In other words, he's saying what I alluded to earlier, that we're giving the opportunity for the people to decide. And if the people decide that they don't want the platform of Hamas or anyone else, they want a two-state solution, or they want a solution, they want a state where only Palestinians live, or they don't even want to live in Palestine anymore, Hamas is saying, let them decide.
They just did. They elected Yasser Arafat president.
Right. Well, I think Hamas decided not to participate in the elections. I think, and some people said that was a mistake, that Hamas should have, but Hamas decided not to participate in the elections. Elections are coming again in the future. Hamas may take a different view. The situation may change very, very soon. The next round of elections, whenever they come up.
Fair enough. Let's talk about Dr. Abu Marzook, what do you really think is going to happen? How long can you drag out the appeals? Realistically.
Right. In terms of the appeal process, we're after Judge Duffy's decision that Dr. Abu Marzook should be extradited, we're in a position now where we can go to another
Let me just fill the viewers in. After less than a year of incarceration, Judge Duffy, who showed rather disregard for learning anything about Hamas, wouldn't allow expert witnesses, and kind of had his mind made up from the beginning, which is why the government forced it into his chambers, ruled that Hamas is not a political organization, it's a conspiracy, and he doesn't want to hear anything about it, and Abu Marzook should be sent to the Israelis. All right.
Right.
You then have taken this to another judge and challenged the fairness and legalities of Duffy. It's a writ of habeas corpus, if I understand it.
Exactly.
But how long can you drag this out? Let's assume the Israelis do want to extradite him. That's what they've asked for. Let's assume the Americans want to do what the Israelis want them to do. 1 year, 2 years.
Right. In terms of the legal process, in terms of a timetable, what seems probable to me is that it's going to go through the district court and then go to the Court of Appeals. That whole process will take at least a year. By the time. And then if the Court of Appeals decides that Dr. Musa Abu Marzook is extraditable to Israel, we have one more opportunity, which is to file a petition in front of the Supreme Court. Exactly, which obviously...
See, I haven't forgotten all that much.
And obviously there's probably little hope that they would accept the case, but not necessarily. The point is that, you know, we know that for sure we will have the opportunity to be in front of the Court of Appeals, but we don't know for sure if we will have the opportunity to be in front of the Supreme Court.
And yet, you also know this is a political matter, and without a political groundswell...
This is exactly what I was going to say following that. What could happen while we're here fighting the legal battle? There may be negotiations which includes prisoners, and Abu Marzook is included. There may be
such optimism.
It happens all the time, Mark.
I'm sure you get this from your religious convictions. You believe God is a just fellow.
There's no doubt that God is.
And I believe just. God is an extremely busy fellow, at minimum. And more than likely, he's too busy to worry about these matters.
That's your point of view.
My point of view is actually a lot more extreme than that when it comes to God. But I'm being gentle here.
You're being gentle. I believe that obviously God is just, and that's my character. It like I said, don't even divide it into being religious or not. It's the way I decided to lead my life. I'm optimistic for that reason. You can call it whatever you want. The point is that I am optimistic that these things will happen. First of all, like I said, the reason I'm optimistic also is because they never wanted Dr. Abu Marzook in Israel in the heat of things. They didn't want, him to precipitate, for example, another bombing. As evil as they are, I think they can afford a limited amount of bombings. In other words, they're willing, to assassinate Ayyash, and knowing that there may be repercussions, but there is a certain level that even they don't want to go beyond.
They can use the excuse of terror to retake over not all the Palestinian areas. Even Netanyahu says he doesn't want to go into the core cities. He just wants to have security authority over the entire area.
Over water, over...
He'll be glad to leave the Palestinian police to take care of Nablus and to take care of Gaza, which is what we do, the white man has done, to take care of the reservations. But the moment they step off their reservations, ta-ta-ta.
Right, exactly. But like I said, that's not a viable solution for me as a Palestinian. I would rather live fighting oppression rather than live in a situation where I have a so-called autonomous state that is, this wide across, where there's no control over water, no control over foreign policy, no standing army.
It's only a state because your leaders claim it's a state. In reality, it is a reservation.
It's a reservation. I think that's an accurate term. I think that it should be used more often. I think that it's an appropriate term to...
Well, thank you, because I use it as often as I can. People who watch Mideast realities
especially for our American viewers, they can identify, if you explain to them what the Palestinians are living under, what kind of situation, if you compared it to South Africa, they may not understand. But if you said American Indian reservations, I think they can begin to understand.
That's also why we use the term. More than Bantustans, because a lot of Americans don't know about Bantustans.
Right, and I think...
I'm Mark Brzezinski. I'm your host for this program. Thank you for watching. We're on this channel at this time, same day of the week, same time. Please watch us every week. Thank you, Ashraf Nubani, attorney, one of the attorneys for Dr. Musa Abu Marzook, who's the political head of Hamas. And we've done a series of programs now on this subject, on this case, and had a very interesting discussion with Ashraf here about the larger historical, theological issues that are involved in the struggle between Israeli Zionism and Palestinian and Islamic nationalism. So thank you again very much for your help, for the discussion, for your candidness and honesty.
You're welcome.